Read the roll, please.
Mayor Jackson,
Here.
Mr. Bowen,
Here.
Ms. Cordova. Here. Mr. Heflin.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Lopez. Here. Mr. Miller,
Yes. Here.
Ms. Parker. Here. And Mr. Robinson. Mr. Lucero is absent.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Veronica Cordova is going to lead us in invocation, and I'll lead us in the pledges. If you all stand, please. Veronica?
Heavenly Father, thank you for blessing us. Thank you for blessing our community that we live in. Allow us to listen with open minds so that we can make sound decisions that are pleasing to you. Guide our meeting in our hearts of everyone that is gathered here today. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Join me with the pledges, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. New Mexico. Symbol of perfect friendship and united culture.
We got the pledge. Thank you. Be seated. All right. Got a fairly lengthy agenda, not bad. Item one, item A on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting that was held December 6th, 2020. These minutes are in your packet. I would entertain action on the minutes, please.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Parker, a second by Mr. Bowen. All in favor, state by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. Item B is an announcement of the employee of the year. Sarah?
Evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight's employee of the year will be the Portales Fire Department. As you can see, they've joined us. We did a survey, a city survey based on the employee of the months, and they received the most votes. They do an outstanding job. They give a lot of their time away from their family to their community, and we're very proud that they are our employee of the year. So thank you for all that you guys do.
Employees of the year. You got some pizza? Pizza and popcorn back. Oh, they got one for each one? One for each shift, okay.
That's not enough pizza for a shift. I guarantee you.
A small pizza. Maybe it's maybe it did.
And then one more for Chief.
Congratulations, folks. We appreciate all the work you do. And I know it's, we've been short staffed most of this year and for the last couple of years, and that's a battle and a struggle. And Chief Kathy, thank you very much for everything you do. Where's Chief? There you go. Thanks again, fellas. Thanks for being here. Congratulations. Thank you. Item C is ratification of the Finance Department's action on bills and expense report. Marilyn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I come before you once again to ask for ratification for the bills. This is for the month of November 2022. And in November, we spent $1,219,561.45. And some large expenditures for that were $730,745.59 for Kilgore improvements. And that came out of the street fund. $253,406.84 for roof repair out of the building fund. And $20,000 out of the LEDA Economic Development Fund for 311 Entertainment LEDA reimbursement. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I await your pleasure.
Miller?
Mayor, Marilyn, on the roof repair, is that passed through from some insurance?
Yes, we did get a little bit over $1 million in insurance. And so with the cost, we'll probably have to have some come out of our budgets, but most of it's being paid by insurance. You're welcome.
Did they finish the library?
Yes.
So they finished with it. We're going to the YAM, started on the YAM, had some issues there and back here.
Back here. So as you can see, they're out there working
Right.
on it here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Make one comment on Kilgore. The striping does look good
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Long time coming.
Yeah, done good. Marilyn, good job. Any other questions for Marilyn? I would entertain action on the ratification of department's bills.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Mr. Lopez. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Item D is a presentation of the overview of the city of Portales' 2021 water supply and demand report. Dr. Wilson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you fine. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And,
Okay,
we brought up the PowerPoint on there. If you want to start with that, or if you want to start with your comments, we appreciate you being here. It's the ball's in your
well,
court.
that's fine. I think you have the PowerPoint up, so we can just begin. The first slide, I can't see which slides you have up. Is
Start with overview.
All right, so that's. All right. Yeah, that's fine. We'll go on to, and thank you for asking me to make this presentation tonight. I'm very honored. The slide number 2 is a summary of what the annual water conservation and use report does. And it documents the water supply and demand trends. And that's an important thing to remember, because what you're going to be seeing is the results from the 2001 water calendar year. So these reports that I do are a year behind. We're looking at last year's data and last year's water supply and demand trends. So this is not telling you what's happening today, but rather the use of it is to determine whether there are long-term trends going on and what the impact might be of those trends on the city. The second measure point is the evaluation of the effectiveness of water conservation measures. And those are one of the main objectives that the state of New Mexico wants to see in these reports. The next one is provides information needed for effective water management, which is going to be obvious and clear. And the third one, which is also important because of the financial support it gives, is meeting the Office of the State Engineers grant funding requirements. Okay, could we have the next slide? The need for water conservation. Now, much of this report is going to be very similar to reports I've prepared in the past, because from year to year, there has not been a lot of change in the last 3 or 4 years. And that's a problem, actually. But let's look at this, the need for conservation. I think you've seen this before, that the aquifer, the High Plains aquifer, providing the city's water supply is being depleted, and its high capacity life has ended. So when the city and the agricultural people around the city started drilling and pumping wells, we were getting yields on the order of hundreds of gallons a minute. And we'll see that in some of these illustrations. Today, the yield has gone down, and a well that produces between 50 and 100 gallons a minute is considered to be a pretty good well today. Much different than it was in the past. The water rights concerns. Now, this next point is in the last few years, there was a hope that expanding the well field, the city's well field onto state lands, adjoining the well field would provide an additional source of water, but that does not seem to be panning out, and because of water rights concerns. And it seems like we're going to have to rely on what we've got in the existing well fields. By the way, if there are any questions as we go along, I'd be happy to answer them. Now, water deliveries from the Ute Reservoir on the Canadian River, that is firmer now. The federal government has made, I guess, a fairly firm commitment to pay their share of that. But and now Orlando Ortiz says that these things the work is moving along well. But finishing, it'll take time to get it all done, and it may be 8 years, not until approximately 2030 before Portales sees any of that water. And in the interim, there's a gap that has to be bridged until water from Ute Reservoir is available. And it's important to continue to reduce the water use and increase the pumping capacity to bridge that gap. Okay, next slide. These are the changes that have occurred from 2020, from the last report that you've seen. The aquifer thickness average in the Blackwater well field, which is the city's main well field, dropped another 2 feet, which is a little bit more than it has been dropping annually. And the average aquifer thickness is now only 28 feet. Going down to the a lower bullet there, the city cannot afford many more years of 2-foot aquifer declines. You can see that dividing 28 by 2 gives us 14 years, but that's not really reliable, because you can't pump water out of a well that has only a few feet of water in it. So, and you can't, we don't know whether that aquifer thickness is going to escalate or not. Now, the relief from the Canadian River is 8 years or more away. And in 2021, Portales had a 900 million gallon groundwater demand, which was effectively the same as 2020. And so the result of this is that peak summer demands are already very difficult to meet and are expected to become increasingly difficult. The 4 new replacement wells added in 2023 will help. Those will go online in January, I understand. And the increased use of reclaimed water from the city's treatment plant will help too. But I don't expect that these things alone will be enough. And I would really like to see increased conservation awareness to reduce the demand to workable levels. And we'll get into that in future in this next slide. This slide and the next one give you an idea of why this is important and what's going on in the well field. You've seen these before. They're just one additional year from the last year's presentation. This is wells Blackwater 19 to 27. There's 42 wells in the Blackwater well field, and 7 of those are not pumped. Were not pumped in 2021 because there wasn't enough water in them. Now, you can see that the average depth to the bottom, or the depth to water, started out at 50, 60 feet in some of these wells, and has dropped and dropped and dropped over time to the average today is 28 feet. And you can see that this shows that range of wells there is in the order of maybe 10 feet to 30 feet. And the depth to water is stabilizing because the yield has dropped. You can't pump as much water out of these wells as we could before. So Now, the next slide is, shows the yield. And you can see how the yield started out at over 800 gallons a minute in some of these wells in the 1970s, and has now dropped to about less than 100 for most of them. And some of them are very small. And the back in when I first prepared these plots in around 2000 and showed them to the city council at that time, I got the impression that the city council was very surprised that the water levels were dropping so much. And these plots helped them to become aware of the need to do something about it. And so as a result, the city in the early 2000s bought the Baker Farm and expanded the Blackwater well field and added quite a few additional wells over the years on that property to help prolong the life of the aquifer. And a lot has been done since then along those same lines. And I know that it's can be construed to be a kind of a gloom and doom situation, and that nothing has happened over this time. You still get water. And I understand that, but we have to remember that a lot was done in the interim to make that happen. New wells were drilled, wells were acidified to improve their yield. The Blackwater Farm or the Baker Farm purchase was a major event, and all of those things helped to keep the supply up to meet the demand for the city. And those kinds of activities are going to need to be continued at least over the next 8 years. Okay, next slide. So now we have a two-pronged approach for bridging the 8-year gap. And the first is to increase the supply. And this has been what we've been doing, what the city's been doing for the last 20 years, is adding new wells, replacement wells, increasing the yield of existing wells, introducing reclaimed water, and replacing the park irrigation with reclaimed water instead of well water, which reduces the demand on the aquifer. And eventually, you've signed up for a very significant boost of water from the Ute project on the Canadian River. So that in the long term is going to be a real benefit for the city. Now, in the interim, it's important to look at reducing demand and to continue to do so. The current overall goal, which was relaxed in the last couple of years when it looked like there would be some water available from additional state lands. Now it does not look like that water is going to be available, and it's important to reinstitute that goal of reducing the water supply, the demand on the water by about 40 million gallons a year for the next couple of years. And because the aquifer, the water demand has been fairly constant at about 900 million gallons, it looks like the city is suffering a bit from crisis shock. I've seen it, we've all seen it in this reaction to COVID, where people finally get to the point where they no longer want to mask up and just become less optimistic, don't take chances. They take chances, and it's for many people, it was too early to do that. But now COVID seems to be in hand, but the water conservation is not. So let's go ahead and look at the supply side and in the demand side and in the resolution. On the supply side, there are important trends. And to recognize that the decreasing aquifer thickness results in decreasing well yields. So we look at the average thickness trend in the Blackwater well field. We have an example of long-term aquifer thickness and yield trends in Blackwater 4, which was one of the early wells. And the declining production pumping capacity in Portales well fields. That's the important issue. Next slide. Okay, this is how the average aquifer thickness at the Blackwater well field has declined over the years. And you can see that the most current point to the far right on that curve is the 28-foot level for the average wells. And the decline has been on the average about a little over 1 foot per year. We don't really want to see that decline rate increasing. Next slide. Now, this is an example from one well, Blackwater 4. And you can see that the yield in the orange line is declining. Started out at over 600 gallons a minute, the yield, and now it's down to what was it, about 50? And at the same time, the saturated thickness is declined and at a rate of about 2.4 feet per year in that particular well. And that decline of saturated thickness is surprisingly regular, consistent. Next slide. Oh, I should mention that Blackwater 4 is one of the city's better wells today. Total production pumping capacity of Portales wells. Now, this is important because if the city can't meet the demand, there's a problem. And the production pumping capacity has dropped. It would have dropped farther if new wells hadn't been added. And you can see there's some places where there's probably errors in the data where you have a significant drop around 2011 and in a significant increase the next year. That's probably erroneous. The rest of the data look good, but there are some increases, but the overall trend is decreasing. The increases come from years of exceptional rainfall, which happens every once in a while. We've had 3 of those years since 2020. And then there have been years of very low rainfall. And what we see, though, is that the city is less, the demand is less a function of the rainfall now, which is good. That tells us that the conservation measures are working. And the rises here can be correlated with adding additional wells to the system. But the overall trend is declining, and to stop that trend, you need to add on the order of 100 gallons a minute per year of more pumping capacity. And that means more wells, and they're expensive. Another way to deal with the decline deal with the declining pumping capacity is to have a declining demand. And let's go on to the next slide. Now we're looking at water supply. And overall, 50 years of pumping in the Blackwater well field, the average aquifer thickness was 140 feet in the 1970s and is now 28 feet. The average well yields dropped from 600 gallons a minute to 70 gallons a minute over 50 years. Portales had 42 black water wells in 2021, and 7 of them, like I mentioned, were not pumped. We can expect that number that are not pumped because they don't have enough water will increase. And it's important to take care of that. Portales' total pumping capacity has been declining for decades. And the issue is in peak summer demands. And the problem there is that with mainly summer demands are for irrigation of landscapes. And while that's, everyone loves to have a garden, but the problem is that we can't provide, it's becoming increasingly difficult to provide enough water to meet everybody's water demands that occur at the same time in summer. And so water systems, you can't really just turn them on and off. You have to, if you turn off like with these rolling blackouts with electricity in some states, like in California, it's much harder to deal with that with a water supply system, because when you turn off the water to one section of town, you decrease the pressure in the pump, in the wells, in the distribution line, and you can have water flowing into the pipes instead of out of the pipes. That could contaminate it, and that means that you'd have to recommend that people boil their water when the water turns on again. It's much better to be able to maintain pressure in the water supply pipes continuously. So there is water in the ground, and the aquifer is getting thinner, and it's getting increasingly difficult and costly to get the water out of the ground, but it is there. And I believe there's enough to get us through this interim until Ute water is available, Canadian River water, but it's going to mean that people, I think, are really going to have to become more conservation aware in the near future and carry that on until Ute water is available. And it can be done. Next slide. Now we're looking at the demand side, how much water people need, use. Since 2005, the water demand has been dropping nicely, but it has now leveled off at about 900 million gallons, which is too high. We'll see a curve that shows this in a minute. In 2014, Portales adopted an ambitious target of reducing the wellfield demand to 700 million gallons a year. But the target was relaxed in 2018 when it appeared that additional water would soon be available from new wells on state lands, but that seems like it's not workable. From what I understand from John Deshay, there are water rights concerns that make the drilling of new wells unfeasible, because you would not get enough water from those wells to make it worthwhile to spend the money. So my recommendation is to reinstate ambitious water conservation measures to bridge the gap. And we talk about this gap. You get sick of talking about the gap, but it's real. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's the picture. You can see that back in 1995 to 2005, the city's overall water demand was very high. And that was on the order of what? Over 1 billion gallons, 1,200,000,000 to 1,400,000,000 gallons per year. And since then, when this people of Portales became aware and the city council became aware that there would be problems, the demand has dropped. And I think that people have learned to get by with less water. You can see that it dropped nicely up until about 2017, 2018. And, the city people didn't leave. They were able to cope with this. They were able to live and be happy. And now recently it's increased slightly and leveled off at a little over 900 million gallons a year, which is about 200 million gallons a year higher than what I would like to see to get Portales through this gap. Next slide. Now here's the long-term demand trends by category. That blue line is the most important one, the top one, because that's the residential water use. And you can see that it's been dropping nicely until a few years ago, 2016 or so, when it has leveled off. And that's something that really needs to be addressed. I think that's the biggest single sector of water use and has the greatest potential for savings because of that. The next one that has a good potential for savings is the brown line with the little brown circles. And it's the co-op water supply. And you can see that's been fairly consistent at about 200 million gallons a year since the year 2000. And this is another area where increased water conservation is really needed and can be, I would think, employed. The industrial demands are the yellow, and they are about the same as the co-op demands now. And they've gone up and down. Closing of the cannery, the soft drink water producers has helped. And I know that it's important to have industry for jobs, but it's also important to have a water supply, and the focus is really important to put on industries that are low water users, not industries that have a high water demand, because the water just simply is not going to be there. The other users, the commercial, the Eastern, the other metered and the unmetered and the reclaimed water. Reclaimed water is a little bitty pink line in the lower right-hand corner, and it's increasing nicely, but it's still pretty low. Those are areas where the water demands can be reduced and should be. There are lots of ways of doing this. And one of the ways I understand that the city has instituted an increase in the water rates, which will be effective in 2023. And that's good. That's it's not something that people are welcoming, but it's the most effective way to decrease demand is to increase the cost of water. And my recommendation is to do it more often, so that there's not a big sticker shock, but you get the effect of it and people become accustomed to it. Water is vital for life, and it's something that people need to recognize is a very important to their lives. I was in Carlsbad recently on some work there, and the building I was in had the water cut off. They were doing some work on the street outside and cut the pipe. So I was going to go to the restroom and there was a sign on it, no water. So this drove home the idea that, hey, you know, we in this society are structured to expect to have water come out of that faucet or be there to flush a toilet. And if it's not, we don't have privies these days that we can run out to the backyard and use for a bathroom that doesn't need water. There are lots of other uses too for water that we have become accustomed to. And, you know, if we stop to think of what would happen if we didn't have that water turn on at the tap, it would not be very pleasant. Next slide. Now, I've talked about these before just now. The 3 largest water users have the best potential for significant water savings. The residential water use has the best additional conservation potential of all of them. Co-op demands show little signs of significant conservation and should be reviewed strictly for savings. I understand that the co-op does not have a water conservation plan like the city of Portales does, for example. And something like this, they should have. Industrial use is increasing and should also be reviewed for savings. The unmetered uses are highly variable and difficult to control. That's because undermetered uses include losses that pipeline breaks and so on that so far in the last year or so have not been significant, but in the past, some pipeline breaks have been very significant for Portales. The remaining uses are low and stable, and the reclaimed water use is growing and increasingly important, but still a small element. Next slide. Now here's the illustration of the Ute allocation, which looks very nice, well above where we're at today. At 900 million gallons today, the total supply and the Ute allocation is on the order of 100 million gallons more, even more than that. So the Ute supply is you might say, the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's a matter of figuring out how to get through that tunnel before the Ute supply is available. Next slide. All right, I've talked about the gap. The additional supplies on state lines look less promising. The immediate problem is maintaining pumping capacity, and that is a problem in summer. And next slide. With lower demands, you have lower pumping capacity. So this slide sort of summarizes the issue right now. What can we do to maintain pumping capacity and not have severe summer water shortages? One thing to do is increase well production, which means more low yield wells, which means money. Another is decreasing water demands, which is equal to more conservation and is equal to an issue of social accommodation. People might not like it. So what I'm recommending is to do both so that the impact is reduced. Have more low yield wells, but at the same time, increase conservation. And neither of those needs to be draconian, but it needs to be addressed. So the best management practices, they're described in the Water Conservation and Use Report that I prepared. And these are some of them: the water conservation awareness, increase water rates. I mentioned that that's the single most effective measure that you can use. Work with residents to reduce indoor and outdoor water use, work with the co-op, that's very important, work with industry, and expand the use of reclaimed water. And so the supply gap may be a decade long, and the possibility of a serious supply shortage is real and must be avoided. And the last slide. Next. Yes, a final thought. There's a tendency today from watching a lot of the movies that we've got to think, oh, the hero isn't going to die. You know, they'll figure out a way to make it work. This is real life that we're dealing with. The heroes are the people of the city of Portales and the city council. And they are not going to die. There will be a way to get through it. But the real question is, how comfortable will you be able to be while getting through this supply gap? And my recommendation is to try to be as comfortable as you can by encouraging more conservation and at the same time increasing the supply. So I'm happy to take questions from you. I know this might sound like doom and gloom, but it isn't. There are things that can be done and will be done and must be done. So, and in the past, you know, there has been a concerted effort over the years to deal with this, and that unfortunately it needs to continue for at least another 8 years.
Thanks, Mr. Wilson. I'll open it up for any questions from the council members. Anybody have any questions for Charles? Mr. Wilson, you touched base on the thickness of the aquifer being 28 feet. And you said, you know, we can't go much lower than that before we can't pump. How thick can that thing, what's the minimum it can go?
For today's modern pumps and so on, the minimum is about 5 feet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we also made a comment about our state lands not being available, or I'm not sure that I'm up to speed on that, Miss Austin. We may have to do some checking into that, because
What I have not heard the details of that either.
okay.
But what I recommend is that you talk to John Deshay, who does know the details of that. What I understand was that the water rights issue for these wells on state land gave the city so little water from the wells that they would otherwise have been using, that it just wasn't worth it to put those wells in and pursue that avenue.
Let me follow up. Mike has a follow-up, Mr. Wilson.
So
Sure.
what you're saying is it could be a yield problem based on the amount of water we can draw based on that water right. Is that the way I'm understanding it?
Yeah, the water right is there. It's not an issue of water rights anymore. It's an issue of more of a technical issue of how to get the water out of the ground, because your water rights are quite large. So you have the right to pull out the water, but the technology to do it is limited, expensive. There's just so much water that can be taken out of a well that when you have a thick aquifer, it's much easier than when you have a very thin aquifer because you have to create a pressure difference between the well and the water and get that water to flow to the well from the aquifer. And that's where the problem is.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Charles Wilson? Mr. Wilson, we appreciate it. It's not all gloom and doom. It's a little gloomy, a lot gloomy. But it's something that we have to address and we have to understand that conservation measures are the only way to go. I mean, the U water project's coming. That's a very expensive project coming.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Ortiz
It is.
Ortega. I know that Orlando Ortega happens to be in the house, Charles. Anyway, he's here and he is the administrator of our Eastern New Mexico Rural Water Authority. Our mayor.
Yeah, I know Orlando.
You know Orlando well. So
I consider him to be a friend and I really appreciate what he's doing to move this project along.
Absolutely, but it's not gonna be, you know, as nice as that's gonna be as a supplement. You know, our well field and our conservation measures that we have to implement in the city and the county are still the wave of the future. So that's something that we've got to get on board with. Anything else from Mr. Wilson? Thanks for your report. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the agenda. Item E is approval of the water purchase contract with the Roosevelt County Water Co-op. Sarah?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I bring back to you the contract that we had at our last council meeting. And due to conflicting schedules, we were unable to get a meeting scheduled with the co-op at the time. I will stand for any questions that you might have regarding the contract. There was a letter that went out to the co-op constituents and I've been in contact with some of them as they call me. And so I developed a chart that I'd like to have Christine share on the screen that shows where the city markup is compared to where the co-op is. I would just share it there so everybody here can see it. We'll post it later.
Is that it?
It's just not sharing to the. It's not sharing to Zoom, but we can post it. We'll bring it up here. So this chart is based on 3,000 gallons usage, which is what the co-op charges their base rate. We do charge the co-op base rate for 1,000 gallons, but I did do the math. I did have Marilyn check over my numbers as well. So currently the co-op's letter stated they charge their community for $43.44 for the first 3,000 gallons of water usage. With the city charges and with the city additional fees, which you can barely see on the right-hand side, that brings our charges to the co-op to $17.06, which is a 61% markup from the co-op. With our new rates, on the right-hand side, you will see the co-op is saying that their bill will increase to $86.02. The city is going to charge the co-op a base bill of $24.59, and that's an increase of 71%. The constituents I did speak to on the phone, I told them I could not speak to the increase, only on what the city's charging. The base rate is right now $3.34 per 1,000 gallons. It will increase to $5.85 per 1,000 gallons. And the fees that are additional are not changing. Those are set by ordinance and those we're not going to change.
Okay. Any questions for Sarah?
So I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so on the right, on the left-hand side where it says co-op current bill, 4344.
Yes, ma'am.
So what you're saying is they're currently at 4344. We are currently charging the county $17.06.
Yes, ma'am.
So the difference between the 4344 and the 1706 is what the county water board is charging their customers.
Yes, ma'am.
So moving to the right, it will go to 8602.
This is their anticipated. I
This
don't
is
know.
their
that-
anticipated,
yes.
this is the board, the co-op water board's anticipated rate, 8602.
Yes, ma'am.
We, the city is charging the county 2459.
Yes, ma'am.
So the difference between that is 6143 is what the co-op is charging their customers, not the city, correct?
You are correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
I have one more
Yes.
question. So it's not going to be a 10% increase. It's going to be another 71% increase on top of what they're already paying.
Yes. And we, in our contract that we've had, we have always been, we should have been charging the co-op the same that we're charging our residents. And even with the new charges that we're bringing to the co-op, they still will be paying less than what our city residents are paying.
Does this include the base rate that we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. This is the base rate and the additional fees, which is the reuse fee. The New Mexico State water testing fee, which is mandated by the state and the conservation fund. And the gross governmental gross receipts, which is on everything but the water.
So when we say base rate, the county, the way I'm understanding, the county has not had a base rate since 2016.
Yes, ma'am.
So they have not had a base rate. The customers of the city of Portales, in the city of Portales, we have always had a base rate.
Well, so the co-op's always had a base rate, the city's always had a base rate, but they've never been equal and they should have been per contract. So the co-op's paid, their base rate's $3.34. Ours is 16.68. That's for 2,000 gallons though. So if you do the math, ours would be $8.34 and the co-op's only $3.34.
So that is included in here.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments, anything from any of the committee members, the side committee members that
I just,
fit in on the
I
contract?
wish we could have met again. I know I sat in here last meeting that we tried to schedule and just, oh, it just didn't work out. I reached out to Ms. Parker just to make sure it was something on our end we couldn't meet up, or I just really wish we could have met up and figured something out, because speaking with the other people on the committee, I felt like we could have done something with what I spoke to you yesterday.
I would like to point out the one thing that is not in this, which is in the contract, is the 5,000 per connection fee. I did not add this in here because that is something that was not voted on in the rate structure. And that would be something that would need to be voted on to this. And it equals around $1 extra per person on the water bill. So the bill would be $25.59 instead of $24.59, if that's what you choose to do so.
And that's in this contract though,
Yes, sir.
and that was in the negotiation part of their contract
Yes.
before as well. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, might I comment? I know Mr. Poole sent a letter out last Thursday. I don't know who all got it, but I believe that's what's a lot of the individuals here. I was wondering if I might address that briefly for the council.
Yes, sir.
In Mr. Poole's letter, the second page or the second paragraph, he states, in the past, the city of Portales has altered their rates that it charges the RCWC without an agreement from RCWC for those changes. The current contract that exists between the parties, which is currently in effect and completely enforceable, does not anticipate such unilateral actions. Attached to his letter was a water purchase contract that is not complete. Doesn't have the date on it. It doesn't have on the third witness. It has a provision regarding whereas by resolution blank, passed on the blank day, the sale of water, well, that's blank. So it wasn't actually, at the time this was proved, that wasn't. But anyway, on the second page under section B, 1A, the contract that he sent that says enforceable reads, all payment for water shall be at the same rate as the residential rates charged by the city of Portales to its residential residents and shall be increased or reduced in accordance with such rate schedule from time to time. So as far as not being in the contract and the city doing something that's incorrect or invalid, that's not correct. That's a misrepresentation. The second thing I'd like to point out is the city council actually adopted a resolution which he adopted, which he included as Exhibit C. And it states that whereas an additional contract should have stated a definite term of the contract from the date of the initial delivery of water, because that's required in a resolution. And so the resolution that was adopted by the city council on July 29, 2003 clearly states said contract shall extend for a term of 20 years from the date of the initial delivery of water as shown by the first bill by the seller to the purchaser, so long as the city has available water to sell. So there was a contract in place. It was a 20-year contract. It allowed the city to do exactly what the city has been doing. The contract up for renewal. Your committee met with the water board committee. We had 8 drafts of a contract. We tried at the last meeting, there was request, can you get some additional impact, information? Can you get a response? I contacted Mr. Poole's office numerous times. I was told that he had a death in the family, and I'm sorry to hear that. But we didn't get any response until just recently, when last Thursday that letter went out. So I just want the council to know that I believe your committee worked in good faith. They met, they tried to discuss things. 8 drafts is a lot of drafts to try to bring people together. So what you have before you is what the final agreement was between your board. And I'm upset and disappointed that the letter was sent out with incorrect information that probably drew a lot of people here. But the people and the audience need to understand that the city isn't forcing anything. The city hasn't violated any contracts or rules in the past. The terms in here are just simply trying to increase the water rates that were never increased during the 20-year term. They should have been, they weren't. So we're just trying, the contract is just an attempt to bring the level of the water, charge for the water that the people in the county get to the same level that the city residents get. That's all it is. It's a big increase because they weren't increased. But that is fair. That's what the discussions were. The 8 drafts attempted to deal with issues on how that was to be accomplished, but I just want you to understand the city negotiated in good faith. Everything they've done has been legal and correct. And I'm sorry for the fact that perhaps this wasn't communicated to you clearly, but if anybody has any questions, I'm sure the board will answer any questions. I'll be responsive to any questions you have. But I think you just heard the engineer's report on the condition of the Roosevelt County water. It's bad. It's not getting worse. The city is taking steps to try to cut down on water and water use. And again, the contract that is presented to you really isn't forcing anything on you that isn't the same as what the city residents pay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. That being said, thanks for that explanation, Steve. The item before us is the water purchase contract. I would entertain action on this contract.
Motion to approve.
To be approved by Mr. Heflin,
Second.
second by Mr. Robinson. Joanne, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bowen,
Yes.
Ms. Cordova,
Yes.
Mr. Heflin,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have unanimous votes by the council on that. And contract is passed as is. Item F is a variance. Kelly? Are you with us?
Thank you, Mayor Council. So we just had a pretty big planning and zoning commission that saw a bunch of these applications, so I'm bringing them to you for final decision. So the first one we've got was submitted by Walter and Claudia Duggar. And they are asking for a resolution allowing, a variance to allow them to do a addition to the backside of their garage, which will make the house unable to meet that 20-foot setback that we have to have for backyards. It will keep them so they have 8 feet instead. This went to the planning and zoning on November 28th, 2022. 4 commissioners were for the application. 1 commissioner was against it. 11 letters were sent out in total. We had 7 return receipts. 1 property owner had no opinion. 2 public utilities were for it. In your packet, you will have some, their application, the answers to the application questions, some pictures of different viewpoints to see where the addition will be, and then a map showing the property in question. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Kelly on this variance for the Ogres?
Sir, do you know, is this the house that we drove by that one the other day? I took you on a ride and the driveway was
The
driveway was
address,
impeding into the alley? That,
no, it won't be this
No.
one. This one is at 1386 Wood Circle.
No, I'm sorry. That's-
okay, that's not.
Any other questions? Entertain action on this variance, please.
Move for approval?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Parker, a second by Mr. Miller. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. F2 is Arise Sexual Assault Services. This is also a variance, Kelly.
Yes, sir. So this is a variance asking for a nonprofit commercial business to operate out of an R1, which is a single family residential area at the address of 801 West 18th Street. Now, Arise Sexual Assault Services has actually been operating out of this location beforehand. They've had a change in ownership, so they just have to re-get their permits with the new owner's name. This went to P and Z on November 28th. It got unanimous with 5 commissioners for it. 16 letters were sent out, 15 return receipts were returned. 3 property owners were for it, 2 public utilities were for it. And involved, you've got the application, the questions, and the map. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer.
Right across the street from James Elementary there on 18th Street.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'll just say, just real quick, if there's any questions, I was also at all 4 of these items. I'll let Kelly handle it. If
Oh, okay.
y'all have any
Thank you.
questions on how the meeting went or how the votes went, feel free to ask me. Other than that, Kelly can take it from you.
Sure. Thank you, Chad. Any questions for Kelly on this variance? Entertain action on variance for Arise Sexual Assault Services. Billy,
So moved.
Second.
motion by Mr. Bowen, second by Ms. Cordova, all in favor, state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The third one is East Nogel vacation of.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So this and the vacation following it are remarkably similar. So I'm gonna give you information that really covers both. So this is actually a complicated situation. There was a survey done 40, 50 years ago where a surveyor accidentally marked undeveloped but platted roads as vacated. Because of that, the bank actually looked at some of those surveys and deeded property owner who is the applicant, the Bacas, and deeded them that land that actually hadn't been vacated by the city, but it's on their deed and they've been paying taxes on it. So they wrote this application. The original application was actually 2 applications to vacate the entirety of both the roads. But on that little supplement I gave you, I marked out little areas. That was what was approved by planning and zoning. Was just those sections, because if we just approve those sections, it doesn't affect anyone else's properties. And there were 2 protests turned in that are in your packet. One protest was they didn't want to lose access to the back of their property. And the other protest was that they'd like it tabled. But if you do it this way, it only matches their deed to the city records. So it's cleaning their paperwork up is what they're requesting. We did this on 11/28. 3 town commissioners were for it. We had 2 against. The 2 against it had voted to table it in a previous motion that was denied. And then it went and was approved. 16 letters were sent out. We had 12 return receipts. 6 property owners were for it. We had 2 property owners against it. 2 public utilities were for it. So if you have any questions, I'd like to answer them for you.
Ted, you had a comment to me earlier.
Yeah, I was just, I made the motion to table it tonight on the floor. My only reason was we just wanted to let the attorneys look at it. But as earliest previous conversations, Steve, correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth. Everything seems right. The paper looked right, just like they've been paying the taxes on it. No other problems, and that's why the table was made. Turned around and got approved, so. As we're asking for this council to approve this as well.
The vacation of that property line. Any other questions for Kelly? Mr. Mayor,
Steve, isn't this kind of like the Franklin edition back in the day? Jake, remember that?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's been a while back, but. Mr. Mayor,
I know as we could.
I'd move for approval.
I'm
Second.
sorry. There's been a motion for approval made by Mr. Miller and a second by Ms. Parker. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. This next one's pretty similar to that, I think, same owners anyway.
Yes, sir. Same applicants, same backstory, same letter, same protest. This will just be the separate section. We're approving one section on one vacation and then requesting to approve the other section on the other vacation. So if you have any questions on this one specifically, please let me know.
Any questions for Kelly on this North Abilene property?
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Let
Sorry.
me second the motion so we can have some.
Well, let me ask the question before we approve. So once this is done, then once it's vacated, then they don't have to come back to us anymore, then it's just their property. correct?
Yeah, so they may have, it's already deeded to them. They're gonna turn in a survey, which is gonna get signatures and gonna get filed. And that property will be according to the assessor and our staff belonging to the applicant.
With that, I second. Sorry, Mike.
Well, I was just, it's procedural. When you have a motion before you need a second, before you have some
Yeah, Okay,
discussion.
sorry. Well,
Oh, good.
Steve,
So there was a second.
She was too fast for my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a motion by Ms. Parker and a second by Mr. Miller. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Kelly, we have 121 South Main is a split of those two buildings.
Yes, sir. So this is just a replat, and then after this one, you guys are done with me. So this is the bargain building and the white building next to it. They're separate stores. They've been separated for a while with the firewall that Johnny Montiel deemed functional and safe for a split. But they're getting ready to sell off one of the buildings, and so they have to legally get the property split. When it went to city council on November 28th, unanimous 5 commissioners for it. 23 letters were sent out with 18 return receipts. And we had 4 property owners who were for it, 2 who were no opinion. 1 public utility who was for it, and then 4 public utilities with no opinion. If you have any questions, I'll stand for comments.
Any questions for Kelly on 121 South Main? I'd entertain action on that replat.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Parker, a second by Mr. Heflin. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Thank you,
Kelly.
Kelly. You did a good job.
Good job.
Good job, Kelly. Yep.
You're doing great on that deal. Made you know. Right. Item G is public input for which no action will be taken, any matter not known about or which could not have reasonably been foreseen prior to the time of the posting of the agenda, informational purposes only. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, limited to 1 presentation per meeting, and no more than 6 speakers on the subject. Councilors will not respond to comments or answer questions to avoid any violation of Open Meetings Act. Questions or requests for information should be directed to the city manager in writing during the regular business hours. All that being read and said, is there anybody that wants to speak to the council? Yes, sir. Will you come up to the podium and tell me who you are?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Jeffrey Chance. I live on East University Drive here in Portales. You have to forgive my voice. It's shot, has been for many years. At 2 p.m. on Friday, December 16th, I contacted the city clerk's office in person looking for information on the new water rates and contract with the Roosevelt County Co-op. Melissa was really pleasant, explained to me that very few were in the office took my contact info, said somebody would be in contact with me on Monday. I returned on Monday at 1:45 PM. Asked to speak to someone in the clerk's office about my request for information. Once again, Melissa responded. I explained to her I needed the information in order to request to speak at the council meeting, as it is stated on the agenda, that these requests must be submitted before 4 PM today. Today being Monday, the day before yesterday, I'm sorry. Community office came out with a copy of the agenda, said I was too late to submit a request to speak at the meeting. However, I may speak during the open forum at the end of the meeting. I was following the rules outlined on the agenda sheet. It was not 4 PM yet. It does no good to be able to speak concerning an item after the meeting when technically it has been passed. I was city council president in our town in Idaho for 12 years. Our city clerk was totally accessible for any questions anytime. What I've seen here appalled me. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Anything else from the audience? Forwarding. We are right now, Mr. Garcia. That's right. Yeah, she's first. Okay.
My name is Mavorn Mbaka. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for allowing me this time to thank you guys for the process that is in place. Whenever everybody has an issue. I know that whenever people come to this podium, you all hear a lot of negativity or complaints. But at this time, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge various people that have helped us get through the situation that we were in with all of our documents, our legal documents showing that we had property which was not ours. And you guys have made it possible for our legal documents to match our border lines. I would like to thank the following people: John DeShay with the city of Portales, Kathy from Aztec, Stephen and Stephanie from Graham Abstract, Johnny Montiel with the county, Mandy Park from the city clerk's office, Stephen Floyd from the tax assessor's office, planning and zoning committee, which saw our that we had gone to for the planning to get our resolution done, which was Miss Pena, Miss Bennett, Mr. Janus, Mr. Watkins, and Mr. Heflin. Dennis Lopez and Jake Lopez, we actually had a meeting with them, and we appreciate everything that you have instructed us to do, because the system works as long as you go through the system. We'd also like to thank Sean Knox, who is from Gridline Surveying. He has gone back and forth with everything that we've gone through and all of the changes. Joanne Martinez from the city. She searched for 30 years of documentation trying to find where our property was vacated. And then the thing is out of everybody working together, I have to go and we have to show the younger generation that are coming up that we appreciate them and that they are an asset to us, because right now we are in a place where people don't want to work, or if they're working, they're at a place where, what are you going to give me? So I want to right now, last but not least, I'd like to acknowledge Kelly.
Oh, you're not embarrassing me in public, aren't you?
I'd like to give her a certificate of appreciation, because you have done a lot of stuff. You've been through us, you've informed us in everything that what we needed to do, and guided us. You did it with a happy smile, a great attitude, and believe me, if anybody can go over there and paint lines on a street, she was out there painting lines on the airport asphalt. So I'd like to say thank you to Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. Thanks. Who's next? Robert? On behalf of you, as a citizen, you can speak. No, you can talk about that if you like to. Robert. Yes, sir. Mhm. You state your name for us so we can get you in the record.
I guess I'm kind of new to a lot of you faces. You know, me and my wife were sitting down the other night and I said, I come here at 7 years old. And I'm 86 now. How many years have I been in Portales? 77. I held one of those seats for 13 years on the council. I was here the first county manager when we put the city on retirement, when we put health and the whole ball of wax. And I don't know, there's a thing, I'm gonna talk mostly to the council, you know, to the administration, none. Because you're the guys that are gonna have to look after your constituency. You know, in these hard days and times, it's hard. And Steve, you need to correct me something here, because that contract says 75, 25, 12, maybe 12. In the long run, what you're trying to do to the co-op. I own 7 of those meters. And I own one in town. But you need to realize, you know, and anything that this government is doing for us, who takes it right on the top of the head? The poor and the middle class. When you raise our rates from $51 a month to 87, I believe is what they told me a month, that's a big jump. That's a big jump, fellas. And you're the guys, you, the co-op, and the county is gonna have to take care of these people. Somebody has. You know, everything has, you know, the poor scale has gone from 20-some to about 30-something. The middle class has gone up nearly to $45,000 to $50,000 a year. You know, and the middle class, not too many years ago, they made a living. They made a living on what they made. Nowadays, you know, they're going to 75 or something. You know, we need to take care of these people because, you know, that's where it hurts. When you take somebody that you raise his minimum wage for water on the co-op from $51 and you raise it to 80-something dollars, that's a big chunk. That's a big chunk. Remember that. You and the county and our co-op has got to take care of those people. We got to take care of those people. We can't do that. I mean, shoot, it's hard to make a living. It's hard to make a living, folks. And I think we all need to work together, and that's a big jump. I checked Fort Sumner, they're in the 50s or so. Fort Sumner pays $57 a month, you know, and I checked Melrose that they're about in line with us, but we only use water. Some of them have sewer.
Thanks, Robert. Your 3 minutes is up, my friend. We all
Okay.
get 3 minutes, okay?
How many?
We all get 3.
Okay,
You used them up.
yeah.
We'll take everything you said under consideration. We appreciate
You
your
bet
service
you.
to the city.
And that 20-year, I remember that 20 with Coke plant and then whenever the 20 years was up, they just up and left hanging. I've been there, been here a long time.
Yeah, you have. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the council? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Quaileen Parkey. And first of all, thank you for, I'm sorry about my voice. First of all, thank you for that water report. It was almost worth getting out in this cold for. Not really, but almost. Second of all, I appreciate the work the council has done. However, I'm seeing a trend in division with the co-op, with the county. And I would just ask the council to be really careful and search your hearts, because the people that live in the county are the same people that shop in the city. They're the people that own property in the city. we're all one and the same. And the minute we start creating divisions and not being able to work together is the minute that we stop utilizing the best of our resources and the best of our people. So I will hope that the council will go back to the co-op, try again. If, I mean, it's passed, but there are conservation efforts that can be recognized between the two of the groups. There are lots of work that can be done to expand our water resources that could be shared efforts between the two groups. And I would just encourage you guys to do that. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And thank you. I'll give my remaining minute and a half back to Mr. Garcia.
Thanks, Wendy. Anyone else? Scott?
Scott Christensen, been in Portales a fair amount of time. First time I worked on the Franklin division subdivision was in '94. I think that was resolved in 2007. So, you know, it takes a lot of work to get things going. The new city manager, I tried to talk to her in March. I have not received a phone call back, leave messages. I just think there's a lot of poor communication or style. I'm not allowed to treat my customers the way I feel like I've been treated. And I'd like to get, we're all a community here and, you know, whether it's disinformation or how it goes, but I would encourage more friendly environment. And you'd want to hear from people. You wouldn't have to leave memos. You wouldn't have to document things. And I just think that's a little weak. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott. Anything else from the citizens? Anything from the council?
I have
Yes,
something.
ma'am.
Can you tell me, Steve, where the baby box is at? Have we heard back from our attorneys when we can input that? Or maybe chief?
The owners of the baby box sent us a draft contract to look at, which was completely different, contained all kinds of new requirements that were not presented to the council as far as payments, insurance, number of people that had to be available. I reviewed it with staff, sent a letter back to them stating what our objections were and our concerns, and it was our understanding that we were to provide a safe location and that they were going to be responsible for everything else, and I have not received a response back from them.
So are we waiting for their attorney?
Their attorney or somebody on their behalf that the individual wrote me. I don't believe he was the attorney. I think he was somebody in administration. And that's who I wrote back and told him, no, that's not what the city approved. City will provide a space. It's at the fire department, which is fully occupied 24/7. It's a safe place, but that's all we're really doing.
Okay. And the only reason I'm asking is because I know that the funding is there, and I do remember, if I recall correctly, that when Angie from Right From Life was here, she did state that they were going to take the maintenance portion of that as their fiscal responsibility.
And I can share their draft contract, but there were numerous things that were questionable and hadn't been brought up. And that's, I reviewed it with staff and responded to them, and they haven't responded back.
Okay, and then another question is, I've had a lot of citizens call me on the convenience center hours. Are we close to opening more than just the weekend?
I believe we have a couple of staff members or employee perspectives that we're going to be interviewing this week. And that's all we're lacking is just employees to keep it manned that long.
Okay, and then one more last question is, can you tell me the percentage of the meters that are already on the automated? I know you've given us that figure before.
I want to say we're at 92%.
Okay, thank you. That's all
Yeah,
I have, Mayor.
Comments from the council. Thank you. Any? No? I'd just like to tell everybody Merry Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas. It's coming up this weekend. Supposed to get really cold, I guess, Friday and Saturday too. So
Thursday too.
Thursday night. So let's be prepared for that. I don't know, if we, I know some of the churches and some of the other things reach out to some of our senior citizens and for heaters, or do we have a safe house for forms? No, not really. You know, I haven't seen them lately, but I know around town, some homeless folks that are, you know, either staying in the parks or staying on some of the benches. We get a couple of those benches over there by the bank that are occupied sometimes in the morning.
We've gotten one at City Hall.
Hey, I worry about those folks at 0-degree temperature, but anyway,
Somebody.
go ahead.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, somebody reached out to me. Can we do anything? I know it's a state highway, but the Greyhound bus stops right in front of McDonald's. It's a traffic hazard. People trying to pull out. I know we have to probably reach out to DOT to put no parking right there.
Yeah.
I know we'd probably have to come up with somewhere that Greyhound bus can drop people off, but it is a traffic hazard. We're just waiting for someone to get T-boned in it.
I can talk to Stephen because he has a good relationship with our new superintendent for DOT on this side, and I'll see what we can get done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe they can pull into that parking lot over there.
Yeah.
Or
If they
the,
replace that water, what is that?
Yeah, they
Stuff in the center.
built it back then.
yeah, well, the milk shed is empty right now, but we would have to contact the owner of that. But that parking lot is pretty big. But I'm just saying, it is a
Yeah,
cluster right there.
you're right.
I think Quayleen had a comment.
Yeah, Eileen.
I do, and I just wanted to say that, the Ministerial Alliance is offering the First United Methodist Church 3 days of extreme hope at the shelter.
Thanks, Quaylee. Thank you for that information.
How would we get that out to?
Folks that happen to call, just have them contact the Ministerial Alliance.
I cannot remember the name of your emergency services coordinator.
Antoinette?
Yeah, I think they're going to be.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And then Johnny Montiel for the county, they coordinate pretty good too. So, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Quayleen. Anything else? Okay, we have one item. Item H is an executive session that we need to go into a closed meeting. Action to convene into a closed meeting to discuss matters as provided for under the New Mexico statutes pertaining to open meetings for limited personnel matters.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we enter into executive sessions for the reasons you stated.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Miller, second by Ms. Parker. Need a
Yes, sir.
roll call, Joanne.
Mr. Bowen,
Yes.
Ms. Cordova,
Yes.
Mr. Heflin,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez.
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
and Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go into a closed session, so
So moved.
Second.
motion by Ms. Parker, second by Mr. Bowen. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Number 3 is action as a result of the closed session. There was no action taken as a result of the closed session pertaining to limited personnel matters. Next item on the agenda is adjournment, and that is adjourned.